The Worried Cat by Avril Rowlands. When I heard footsteps coming up the stairs, I hid under a low table. There was nowhere else in the room I could hide, for there was very little furniture. I had jumped in through the window and should have jumped straight back out again, but I didn't have the strength. Besides, the smell of the food was so tempting I couldn't bear to leave. So I slunk under the table and curled myself into a small ball, which wasn't very hard, for I'd always been a small cat. I was shaking with fright. Let me tell you something of my story. I have always been a worrier. The cat who lives down the road says I worry too much. She says I should take every day as it comes, but I've never been able to do that. Anyway, it's all right for her. She lives comfortably with plenty to eat, a nice place to sleep, and the odd mouse to keep her amused. Not like me. My mistress is poor, very poor, and I have to work hard to keep her home from being overrun by rats and mice. And even then I get no thanks. My mistress isn't a very kind person. So when I was expecting kittens, I was worried, for I knew my mistress wouldn't want to feed them. And I was right, she didn't, especially 6 extra mouths. She threatened to drown them, so I took them away and hid them. And that was only the start of my problems. I was very weak and needed to eat, otherwise I wouldn't have enough milk for my babies. Where was I to find food? I couldn't go home. In any case, how could I leave my kittens on their own? In the end, I had no choice. I had to find food or we'd all starve. So that evening I crept out of the stable in which we were hiding. "Darling, how lovely to see you." It was the cat from down the road. She was full of news. "It was such fun. Pity you missed it. The whole place had been in uproar, all because of this man called Jesus. Do you know, he stormed into the temple, kicked over the money changers' stalls and set free all the animals and birds waiting to be sacrificed. He saved them. During the Passover festival too. They say he's a king or something, but whatever he is, the chief priests are furious. They're searching for him everywhere. They want to arrest him and put him to death." She stopped to take a breath and looked at me for the first time. "What about you? You look dreadful. What have you been up to?" I told her. "You can stop worrying," she said. "I'll look after the kittens." "But I still need to find food." "You can stop worrying about that too," she purred. "For I know where there's a meal with lots of food. It's in my house. And it's terribly, terribly secret." And that was how I ended up shivering under a table in my friend's house. The door opened, and from my hiding place all I could see were feet. Dirty feet in dusty sandals. The hems of their robes were dusty too, and fraying at the edges. I counted the feet. 26. That made 13 people. They sat down, and I was just wondering how long they would be staying and whether there would be any leftovers, when one of the men suddenly stood up. I could hear water being poured into a basin. The man returned, knelt down in front of one of his friends, and began to untie his sandals. I was curious, so I crept out, forgetting to stay well hidden. The man whose sandals were being untied was trying to pull his foot away. "No, Lord, I'll never let you wash my feet." I didn't understand. Surely the kneeling man was a servant, for it was a servant's job to wash visitors' feet. He certainly didn't look like a servant, for he was dressed in a plain robe with a towel tied round his waist and a basin of water in his side. "Peter," said the kneeling man, "you don't understand. If I don't wash your feet, you'll no longer be a follower of mine." "Then wash me, all of me, teacher, my hands and my head too," the man called Peter said eagerly. "Anyone who has had a bath is clean, apart from his feet." I watched as he dried Peter's feet and then slowly moved around the group, washing everyone else's feet. The water in the basin turned grey. "You are right to call me your Lord," said the man when he'd finished, "and your teacher. So learn the lesson I've been teaching you and do as I have done. Don't expect others to wait on you. Don't be self-important. Look after one another. If I'm willing to be a servant, so should you be." He sat down. I looked around the pairs of clean feet. There was only one dirty pair now, Jesus' own. For this man, I realised, must be Jesus, the man who, as my friend said, they were calling a king, the one being hunted by the chief priests, the one they hated and wanted to kill. I looked up at his face. It was a calm face, an untroubled face, but it was a sad face, and his sadness touched my heart. I forgot my worries. I forgot my hunger. I even forgot my kittens. I crept back to my hiding place. Jesus thanked God for the food and drink. Then he broke the bread into pieces and poured the wine into the cup. As he shared the bread and wine with his friends, he said, "This is my body, given up for you." And then, "This is my blood, poured out for you. Remember this." I didn't understand what Jesus meant, but I've never forgotten those words. The meal began, and crumbs were dropped, but I didn't eat them. I'd forgotten my hunger, for I was too busy watching Jesus. He helped his friends to the best pieces of meat and poured wine for them when their cups were empty. He spoke to everyone in a kind way, and the room was filled with the warmth of his love for his friends. Now, cats are loners, and I've lived on my own all my life, for I don't count the company of my mistress. I've muddled through, fighting my own battles and worrying about this and that and everything else, but then that's my nature. The cat down the road is my only friend. But as I lay hidden under the table while Jesus and his friends ate and drank, I realised I had never had anyone to love, and no one had ever shown love to me. I hadn't known what love was until that moment. I stretched myself and purred. But as the meal continued, I began to feel less comfortable. There was an atmosphere in the room. Something had changed. The very air was tense, and I could feel my fur prickle. When everyone had finished eating and drinking, Jesus looked around the group. "One of you here tonight will give me away to my enemies." The room fell silent. Then they all began to speak at once. "Who is it, Lord? Which one of us?" Peter nudged the man who was sitting closest to Jesus. "John, ask him which one of it is." "Which one of us is it, Lord?" Quietly Jesus replied, "It is the one to whom I'll give this bread." But I already knew who it was. Before Jesus had dipped the bread into the dish of sauce and handed it to the man sitting on his left, I knew. I could sense it. I'd seen how the man's feet nervously rubbed against each other, how they were sweaty with fear. I could smell that fear. The air was foul with it, and my fur crackled and stood on end. "Be quick, Judas," Jesus said. Judas stood up and left the room. I could see the door opening onto the darkness, for it was now night, and it closed behind him. I moved near to Jesus, and he put out his hand and stroked my head. "Love one another," he said to his friends. "As I have loved you, so you must love one another." I thought of my kittens. I felt calm and at peace. My problems hadn't gone away, but I felt I'd been given the strength to cope. I would find food and drink. I would feed my babies, and they would live. I looked around at the 12 pairs of feet in dusty sandals. 11 pairs were clean, 1 pair was dirty, Jesus' feet. None of his friends had thought to wash the feet of their master. But then a cat can't see into the heart of a human being, and everyone in that room had his own worries and his own sorrows to bear. "Love one another as I have loved you," Jesus had said. So I put out my tongue and gently licked his dusty feet clean.